In this video, we'll go through some of the mistakes that I made when I started learning Elementor so you don't make them, as well as some of the things I just didn't know. Let's get started. One of the mistakes that I see people doing is that they don't take advantage of the footer or header tags when using Elementor. They'll just basically default to whatever Elementor gives them. And that's very important for accessibility and just for SEO that you actually pick the right tags. So let's go into give you an example. So let's go into the footer of the page. We're going to scroll down to the bottom. And when you click on the footer section, you'll notice that here it'll just say HTML tag, right? So now let's pull up the website. Go into our developer tools. Let's make this just a regular desktop site. We're going to scroll all the way down to that section. We hover over the developer tool. You'll notice that Elementor by default just makes it a section. It doesn't mention that this is an actual footer. So what we want to do is go back into Elementor, choose the section, and then from the HTML tag section, choose the footer. We're going to hit update. We're going to refresh the page. All right, and then now we're going to click on this, and you'll see that now it says footer. This is a much more better way to kind of do things in terms of accessibility and in terms of SEO. So now let's go to another one that I think a lot of people mistake, which is the header tag. So let's go visit the site, and then now some people what they do is that they actually make the whole navigation header. So what the header tag is actually supposed to do is kind of contain like your heading of the site. So for example, text that H1 tags, you have a header, you have an author area. That's kind of what you use the header tag for. So we're going to go onto this page, and then we're going to choose the header, which is actually this, and then we're going to choose the header tag. So let's go into the section. HTML tag, we're going to choose header. And this is the appropriate way to kind of use the header tag on your website, and make sure that you have that for every time you're using kind of like a container that has header information. The second mistake that I see people make with Elementor is that they're using the text widget as opposed to the heading widget in order to create headings. Let me show you what I mean. So let's go into the Elementor edit screen. All right, and we're going to go down here to Culinary Adventure. So they're using the text editor instead of using the heading editor. So why is that important? The heading editor is going to give you a lot more flexibility in terms of how you can choose what kind of heading goes in here. Now I am aware that you can pick it from the drop down menu, but that adds an extra step, and it adds an extra tag that you don't necessarily need. So let's go in here, and we're just going to style it. We're going to choose the typography, so it's going to be H2 tags. We're going to center it, and we want to make sure this is an H2 tag, so we can just choose there. If we wanted to make an H3 tag, we could as well. So this is just a much better way to do it. So this is right here, Culinary Adventure. Hit update and delete this one here. Perfect. Another mistake that I see people doing is they just don't name their headers and footers or just template elements something useful. I'm going to give you an example on this particular page. When I hover over with Edit with Elementor, the headers go Elementor header number 26, footer number 53. That's just not something useful. So once you start having more than one header or more than one footer on your site, for example, if the about footer header is a little bit different than the one they're using on every other page, it can start getting a little bit confusing. So I would get used to doing it this way. Let's go down to the theme builder. And then I would give Elementor the header, for example, something that kind of shows you, or it's a little bit more useful for somebody who's editing it. So I would call this one, for example, default Elementor header. So you can go here in the settings and change the title. So default Elementor, or sorry, default header. That way, when you have a second header that's just in the about page, you can just call it about header. Same thing for footer. So let's just correct that mistake here right now and call this the default footer. Go into settings and call it default footer. There, that's simple. So let's go back to just the template area. Now look at our theme builder and see, now we have the Elementor theme loop, we have a default footer, and we have a default header. Now you should also be able to rename the header without having to go into the Elementor edit screen, just by clicking on the 3 little dots and hitting rename. That's another way that you can kind of do that. Elementor actually has some kind of nice built-in functionality that you may not be aware of. So some people make the mistake of thinking that they're not actually there. So let me show you a couple of examples. So say in this case, you have an icon of a cat that for all intents and purposes is just a decorative element. So somebody with a screen reader doesn't necessarily need to know that there's a cat there or an icon of a cat. So how do you do that in Elementor? So you select the element that you want to kind of make sure that the screen reader knows is something that's used for presentation. You click on it, and then over to the Advanced tab, you'll see something called Attributes. Now this is the area where you can create custom attributes for any element that you have. So in this case, we would do role presentation, and now the screen reader knows to kind of avoid reading out the alt tag or anything like that in this area of the page. Now another thing that you could do, it doesn't necessarily need to be for the whole section. Let's say you wanted to do the link, or you wanted to give more context to what the link does. So for example, here I have a link to a sponsor. I want to let Google know or the readers know that, hey, by the way, when you click on this link, you'll be taken to a sponsor. The way that you do that is in your heading tag or anything that has a link, you would click on the little cog icon for the link options, and then you'll see here the custom attributes. So in this case, you would do REL reference, and then we're going to go sponsored and update. So now when you look at the link here on this page, let's pull it up actually. Let's take a look. The two elements we just edited. Let's go to more tools. We're going to pull up our developer tools. And now when you click on the link, you'll notice that now you have the REL equals sponsored for a sponsored link. And then when you click on the little cat, let's see here. See? Here you go. You have the role presentation. Another mistake that I think people make in Elementor is that they sometimes tend to do a lot of the CSS edits by clicking on an element, clicking on their advanced, and then clicking on the custom CSS. I think that's fine, but that kind of does your Elementor CSS changes inline. I like to keep things a little bit more clean. So what I like to do is I like to go to the site settings, and then there's an area here under the site settings where you can just do custom CSS. This kind of allows you to have all your CSS in one place. It keeps everything clean. And it actually, whenever you make a change, you're not making just changes to one widget. You can use that change and affect the whole site, which is kind of nice. So if you're using some custom CSS, or you want to use some custom CSS, make sure you take advantage of this little hidden feature within Elementor. Another mistake that I see Elementor beginners make is that instead of using the site settings and going into the themes, they actually make changes to their headings or their fonts using the builder here. And you're just going into, like, let's say you wanted to edit the headings on the site. They go into each individual heading, and then they change the colors using each individual widget. That's very time consuming, and every time you want to make a change, you have to make the change on a whole bunch of sections. And this is a mistake that I see beginners making all the time. So the correct way to do it is to go into this, again, site settings, and then you can take advantage of creating global colors. So for example, if you wanted to add a blue color, right, you can go in here, and then you have created a blue color. That's a weird blue color. There we go. And you hit update. You can also call it, if you want it to be more generic, H2. So then now this will have a class of H2. So then you can go in here, and now you select your H2 tags, and you just choose the H2 color, right? And now anytime you want to make a change to that color, all you have to do is go into the settings, and then you can call it anything else. So let's go into there. We're going to go to global colors, and now we're going to change this color to red, and boom, automatically all the headings are red. So that's a much more efficient way to do things as well. Now, what you may also want to do, aside from using the global fonts, is you can go to site settings, typography, and then you can also make sure that all your colors are the same. I like to use the green for this particular site, so I'm going to go into H2 and I'm going to use the primary color. In typography, I'm going to use the pre-made font settings that I have here. And that's also changed the same exact way. Instead of just colors, you just create different typography styles. So you go on the global fonts, and here you'll find the different ones. So I have, for H2 headings, I always use the same one, stuff like that. So that's a much more efficient way to do things. Those were some of the mistakes that I made when I was learning Elementor. I hope you find them useful. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment below, and see you soon. Don't forget to subscribe.